Hey folks, today I'm going to do a brief summary of the things that I find glaringly obviously wrong with the flood account, and thus why I do not believe it. This is not by any means going to be an exhaustive list of all of the things that make me not believe in a global flood, but just some of the issues that stick out as the most glaringly obvious issues. First, though, we're going to read from the Bible. I'm going to skip some of the parts that I don't think are important. That said, let's jump in. I'm going to bring flood waters on the earth to destroy all life under the heavens. Every creature that has the breath of life in it, everything on earth will perish. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. You are to bring onto the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you, 2 of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, and of every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. You are to take every kind of food that is to be eaten and store it away as food for you and for them. Okay, let's skip ahead just a bit. Take with you 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, and 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate, and also 7 pairs of every kind of bird, male and female, to keep their various kinds alive throughout the earth. Alright, so I skipped over the part where they talk about the size of the boat, and I haven't done any calculations myself. I'm not going to go into if the boat is big enough to hold everything and if it's going to break apart. I think those are likely issues, but I don't care too much. There's plenty of other issues to go over here. So let's think for a moment about what animals he had. He had 7 pairs of each kind of clean animal, 1 of each kind of unclean animal, and 7 pairs of each kind of bird. So Deuteronomy 14 lists 10 types of animals that were considered clean. 10 times 14 means we have a total of 140 clean animals. So let's just keep that in mind and come back to it after a bit more reading of the story. In the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the 2nd month, on that day all of the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened, and rain fell on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. Just note real quick, when I hear a 600-year-old man, I'm somewhat skeptical. But let's keep going. The waters rose and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. They rose greatly on the earth, and all of the high mountains under the entire heavens were covered. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 15 cubits. Every living thing that moved on land perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all of the creatures that swarm over the earth, and all mankind. Everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. People and animals and the creatures that move along the ground and the birds were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left, and only those with him in the ark. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days. So some interesting notes to make here. We know that there are in fact mountains already at this point, because water is covering over them. So you can't say that mountains didn't exist and that they happened sometime after. This means that the water is many thousands of feet high. Everything on earth died. That is said in no uncertain terms. It doesn't say everything in this region died. No. Everything died on the face of the earth. Let's read that again. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. So, this isn't a regional flood. You can't explain it away as that. It couldn't have covered the mountains and still been a regional flood. That's not how floods work, because it would have to be thousands of feet deep. Okay, so let's get back on track. So I'm not going to read it all, but at this point the waters start to go down and the ark comes to rest on top of a mountain. It's not until even later that the tops of the mountains become visible, and a full 40 days later when Noah starts sending out birds. A bit later they finally get off the ark, kill at least every one of every kind of clean animals The end. There's a lot to go over here. Let's assume the boat was big enough. There was somehow enough water, the boat somehow didn't break apart, everyone somehow had enough food, and they made it safely to the time where they were able to get off the ark. At this point, we have a bunch of animals who need to eat. Most of the vegetation has been destroyed. A handful of types of vegetation can likely survive being under salty water that long, but not most. So plant eaters will struggle to find enough food. Carnivores simply can't eat without destroying an entire species. The first time they eat any one of the non-clean animals, that entire line dies out. The first time any one animal is unable to bear young for any reason, its entire kind dies out. And let's not forget about flying animals like bats, which can eat thousands of insects a night. Remember, the only insects alive are those on the ark, and they are being eaten by most types of birds, and many of the other animals as well. I mean, the reason that insects survive today is because they are in vast quantities and they replicate quickly. If you just took a pear, it wouldn't work. Like, you can't take a pair of ants and a pair of bees, but clearly you would have needed those. You can't just take the mammals and stuff. You have to take the insects as well, which would mean you'd have to take whole bunches of hives and whole bunches of... And, of course, none of this is mentioned. And it poses additional problems because yet even more space would need to be taken up by the millions of types of species of insects that there are. How could the populations possibly survive this? They simply don't have the numbers. We would end up with just a couple types of animals left on the earth. And even those would likely die out. How about the sea creatures? Well, they didn't sink, but they had massive changes in habitat. The salinity change in the water would be drastic, likely killing both the freshwater and saltwater fish. Slow-moving things that live in relatively shallow water would be crushed and killed by thousands of feet of water suddenly on top of them. How about the flood itself? Currently, it's estimated that if all of the glaciers and ice caps on Earth were to melt, the sea levels would increase by about 230 feet. All estimates I could find on rain say that if all of the water in the atmosphere were to condense at once, it would increase the water level by about 1 inch. The Bible, on the other hand, is saying that the waters covered over all of the mountains. Let's pretend Mount Ararat, where they stopped, was the tallest mountain. It's almost 17,000 feet tall. So, just to cover that, we need to increase the water level by about 74 times the amount that we raise it with the rain and the ice caps all melting. Where is that water coming from? And where does it go? This list of issues that I've gone over so far is not the only issues. Assuming that the animals did survive, how did they get to the various places on Earth where they need to be? We have kangaroos, koalas, things on little islands throughout the Pacific. Anything in North America. How did they evolve at a vastly faster rate than we observe today? Since they would have had to have had relatively few species. There's certainly no way that the millions of species that exist today could have fit on the ark, so there has to have been lots of speciation after. I mean, this is certainly what Answers in Genesis and other young Earth creationist people believe. So, evolution has to have happened at an extraordinary rate ever since the flood. I guess we'll just have to chalk it up to magic. But if you use such elaborate magic tricks in order to accomplish your goals, wouldn't it just be easier to kill everyone that you wanted dead? Just snap your fingers and have the people die, like Thanos. I mean, it's not like he can't do this. He did it in Egypt. Simply kill everyone you don't want. Boom. Problem solved. We don't have this weird magic flood. You don't have to wipe out all the animals who did absolutely nothing and cause all of these problems with this delicate ecosystem that you created. But I guess I'm just not as clever as God, so I don't come up with nearly as creative ways to torture and kill his creation as he does.